Greetings, this is Dr. Paul Kouritzis, and the following narrative comes to us from ancient Egypt and is called Isis and the Seven Scorpions. It was inscribed onto a stone tablet called the Medinuk Stela and outlines step-by-step instructions on how scorpion bites should be handled, making it a fine example of instructional literature of the salvific type. The inscription on the tablet also includes a number of magical incantations that a particular individual could recourse to if on the receiving end of a scorpion bite. And it also contains a prescription of barley bread, salt and garlic intended to exfoliate the venom. So, Isis and the Seven Scorpions. So after gathering the dismembered parts of her brother husband, the goddess Isis, the Egyptian Isis, decided that it would be best to retire to some remote edge near the Nile Delta, a place from where she could gain some perspective on Seth's inherent nature and calculate her subsequent move. So Seth, of course, was her evil brother. But it wasn't long before her newfound quietude was interrupted by the ibis-headed Thoth, the god of writing, who informed that the best protection against Seth's malevolent forces was one in which he was constantly on the road. So he warned her from being stationary, from staying in the same spot. So obviously Isis was beset by fear for the life and well-being of her son, Horus, who was also her only son by Osiris. So she steadfastly gathered her belongings and then called upon seven scorpions to illuminate a safe way through the treacherous masses. Isis and her entourage left at dawn, walking as unobtrusively and vigilantly as possible as to avoid drawing attention to themselves. At some point, they become conscious of their overwhelming fatigue and decide that the best course of action would be to overnight at a nearby town called the Town of the Two Sisters. Amidst a nest of very extravagant edifices, Isis reasoned that these opulent folk would be compassionate and generous enough to offer some kind of temporary lodgings to the less fortunate souls of the neighborhood. But boy, was she wrong. A courteous knock on the door was answered with an irreverent verbal scalding, followed by the proverbial door slam. Isis, of course, was heartbroken and proceeded to look elsewhere for hospitality. Angered beyond reckoning by this perceived wrongdoing, the seven scorpions huddled together and combined the venom from their tails into a lethal cocktail, which was then shuttled by the swiftest of the army beneath the household door and into the flesh of the woman's younger son. Sight of her son's puncture wound sent the bad-natured woman into a frenzy, and it wasn't long before she flung open the front door and emerged into a street permeated by graveyard silence, screaming at the top of her lungs, "Help me! Help me! A scorpion has bitten my precious boy!" It seemed as though her cry might fall on deaf ears, until Isis, who had taken up residence at a peasant girl's house nearby, heard the commotion and emerged from her quarters to investigate. Renowned for her magnanimous and altruistic nature, Isis was too moral a goddess to be influenced by prior wrongs committed against her character. She assured the distressed woman that she would dispel the poison from her son's dying body. In what was obviously an optimistic turn of fate, Isis trudged into the affluent household from which he'd been rejected and took the dwindling child into her arms. Then she recited a magical incantation that involved naming each of the seven scorpions, thus bringing the potency of their venom under her direct governance. Cradled like a precious infant against her divine breast, the boy recovered from his near-death state and regained his former robust rose-coloured complexion. Everybody in the immediate family was most grateful for this selfless act. including the child's mother, who expressed her earnest gratitude by bequeathing to Isis and the peasant girl her entire fortune. And there ends the beautiful ancient tale called Isis and the Seven Scorpions. So join me next time for another great Egyptian myth. See you then.